Ancient and Modern Societies of the Learned, sections 6 to 9, read by Anna Simon. 6. Thought, which we must not omit speaking of, is a peculiar motion of the brain, the proper organ of this faculty, or rather a certain part of the brain, continued in the spinal marrow, and in the nerves with their membranes, constitutes the principal seat of the soul, and performs the motion both of thought and sensation, which vary wonderfully according to the different structure of the brain in all kinds of animals. As to other movements of the body, performed by the means of the nerves, we undertake not here to speak of them. The ethereal fire environing all things, and therefore supreme, permeating all things, and therefore intimate, of which a kitchen fire is a certain analogical and imperfect similitude. The ether, I say, by a wonderful structure of the brain thereunto adjusted, and by exterior objects that act on the brain through the means of the nerves of the senses, and excite therein various imaginations, duly executes all the machinery of conception, imagination, remembrance, amplification, and diminution of ideas. It is this fire alone, more fleet than thought itself, and by far more subtle than any other kind of matter, which can with so quick a motion run over the tended cords and ligaments of the nerves, and variously agitate them according to the different impressions of objects upon the nerves. What is more, the ether is a reviving fire, infusing a sweet and gentle warmth, not burning, not dissipating, not consuming as ordinary fire. It rules all things, says the author of the treatise upon diet. It disposes of all things according to nature, without noise, and imperceptible either to the sight or touch. In it is soul, mind, prudence, increase, motion, diminution, alteration, sleep, watching. It governs all in all things, and never suffers celestial and terrestrial beings to be at rest. This fire is Horace's particle of divine breath, and Virgil's inwardly nourishing spirit, heavenly origin, fiery vigour, and if there be any other name which he uses to express it, the animal spirits of the moderns and their liquidity of nerves are but empty titles, unless they denote this fire. Now by what means imaginations are excited, or ideas formed in the brain, which organ, as it is corporeal and very complex, it can produce nothing but what is corporeal, we made to appear in our second book of Esoterics, where we demonstrated that all ideas whatsoever are corporeal. Wherefore, rejecting the notions of some who figure to themselves the diaphragm to be the seat of the soul, or the heart, or liver, or other parts, it behoves men to know, says Hippocrates, or rather Democritus, in that valuable treatise upon the falling sickness, that no other part but the brain affords us pleasures, as mirth, laughter, diversion, and, on the other hand, grief, anxiety, sadness, and mourning. But it means we become wise, and understand, and see, and hear, and know what's base and honest, good and bad, agreeable and disagreeable, discerning some of them by rule, and perceiving others by the advantage that is annexed to them. By the same, in their proper times, we distinguish pleasures from what are not so, and the same things please us not always. By the same we grow delirious and run mad, we nurse terrors and fears, some haunting us by night, others by day. Our thoughts are taken up with dreams, we give into unseasonable errors, we are possessed by empty cares, we are ignorant of standers-by, and we fall into a disuse and forgetfulness of things. All this is occasioned by the brain when it is not in its due position, that is to say, when it is not sound, but is hotter or colder, moister or drier, or, in fine, suffers anything contrary to what is natural or usual. The tongue is not more the organ of the taste, than the brain is that of thought. But let our discourse return to the place from whence it had digressed. 7. The seeds of all things, begun from an eternal time, are composed out of the first bodies, or most simple principles, the four commonly received elements being neither simple nor sufficient. For in an infinity all things are infinite, nay, even eternal, as nothing could be made out of nothing, and therefore we may conclude that the organic structure of seeds could not be formed out of any concourse of atoms or any species of motion whatsoever. To illustrate this tenet by some example or other, the seed of a tree is not alone in power a tree according to the notion of Aristotle, but a real tree in which are all the integrant parts of a tree, though so minute as not to be perceived by the senses without microscopes, and not even then, but in a very few things. All that this tree wants is a fuller distinction and magnitude of parts, which is gradually acquired by the application of simple bodies of distinct species, that are, as so many constituent parts, necessary to the nourishment and increase of that simple body. Therefore, no species of trees perishes, inasmuch as the seeds in which it lives always remain alive, and should they be received in a proper place, forthwith they imbibe a more distinct conformation, nutrition, augmentation, and by degrees arrive at a due perfection. The same may be said of the other species of the universe, not only of animals and trees, but also of stones, minerals, and metals, which are not less vegetable and organic, having their own seeds, formed in their own matrix, and increasing with a peculiar nutriment, as well as men, quadrupeds, reptiles, birds, fishes, and plants. 8. 'Tis true, philosophers, for the most part, are of opinion that gold, crystal, etc., are similar, are bodies of like nature and parts, made up of an external apposition, or any other way, because they appeared so to the sense.